Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. You're listening to Continuum Comics, and I was on a friend's channel the night before last, I guess it was, and they were talking about I'm going to mention Disney specifically. That's the image I have here is it shows their stock over the last few days and how it dropped sharply. Um, the conversation though that this is sort of a reaction to was about companies in general and how it seems like they do something the fans hate, and then instead of noticing that or responding to that and turning things around to make more money or for their stocks to go back up again, instead they double down and just keep going down that same path, right? And so a couple of friends of mine were basically asking, why would anybody do that? It made no sense to them. And so I wanted to kind of address that. I think I know why they are doing it, and I think it actually makes sense from that point of view. So before I can get into that, I'm going to tell a story. And by the way, I'm going to talk about some sort of sensitive topics, and I'm going to go out of my way to try to not insult anybody. Um, Insulting people in no way, shape, or form makes the world a better place, right? Everybody has to love everybody, even if someone does something you think is wrong. You need to have sympathy for them and empathy and things like that, and just sit down and talk kindly, explain your side of it, and ideally one person concedes, the idea and both people kind of level up, right? So I'm going to talk about some weird stuff and don't tune out automatically, okay? Hear me out, please. Okay, so when I was, well, like I graduated high school in the mid 90s, and that first Christmas after graduation, I remember we found out my mom had cancer. And then by the following Halloween, she was gone. She passed away. Before the end, though, she was getting these radiation treatments about every other day in Cleveland. We lived about an hour and a half south of there. And the chemotherapy and all that, it would really take it out of mom. It would make her really tired. And she was not strong enough to drive herself home from these treatments. So I would drive her up and then drive her back and, so on and so forth. And so on one of those trips, the doctor takes us aside and he basically says, this isn't working. So we're done. We're just going to quit trying. And so that's bad enough, right? But then on top of that, he says, there's actually a new treatment that just got invented, and I think it could save your life. And mom was like, wow, really? And he goes, yeah, but you'll never afford it. You guys are too poor. And so, like, the whole drive home for like that hour and a half or whatever, my mom just cried. And like when I was born, my dad took off. Um, I didn't have siblings or anything like that. So me and my mom were really close. And it was just really bad, right? And we get home and mom just goes to bed. for the night. And I go into, like, we had like a downstairs living room, and I turn on the TV, and there was a baseball strike at the time. And these guys who I perceived to be millionaires wanted even more money, right? And by the way, I heard over the years that one of those guys actually owns a gold bathtub. And I got so mad in that moment that, you know, this guy basically owns a golden bathtub. And meanwhile, my mom doesn't have enough money to live, right? And so in that moment, I basically became a socialist. And this is the sensitive topic I'm going to be getting into. And don't jump ship yet. Hear me out. Let me explain. I just thought that the current system was unfair, right? And so in college then, I wasn't the only one. I had other friends who felt the same way. And I think that it's safe to say that these days there's a lot of college kids that feel that way. And like I actually know quite a few people in Hollywood. When Facebook first became a thing, the first thing I did on Facebook was I sent friend requests to all the people who worked on my favorite cartoons from when I was a kid. And they all accepted my requests back then. And whatever year that'd be, I don't even know, 2008, 2007, I don't know. But at any rate, whenever it was, they all accepted my friend requests. And so over the years, they no longer seem like celebrities to me, they're just friends. Um, and at any rate, a lot of them are are firm believers in socialism, and they think that the current system is corrupt. And by the way, I do think the current system is corrupt. I don't like the current system. but but at any rate, they boy, it's hard for me to put this into words. They want equality. They do it because they care. All of this is done with good intentions, right? I'm gonna tell another quick story, and I promise this is all going somewhere. When I was in my 20s at some point, I can't think what year it would have been now. Um, Late 90s, I guess, maybe. I don't know. At any rate, for a little while, I worked for a dry cleaning service, and I drove a truck, and it was kind of like a UPS truck in terms of its shape and so on and so forth. And I would drive up to Cleveland on my truck route and get there basically in the middle of the day, and I'd have lunch, and then I'd turn around and I'd drive back to my town. And that was an all-day thing. You'd stop and you'd pick up various articles of cloth that needed cleaning, and they really didn't care how long it took me to do it. They were going to pay me the same whether I got my day done fast or whether it took me forever to do it. They were paying me the same no matter what. All they cared about was the truck full of laundry had to be back at the dry cleaning place by the time the third shift guys showed up, because then they were the ones that washed everything, right? At any rate, on this truck route, there was this Russian restaurant, and there was this family that owned it. And the dad, the main owner, was born in Russia. Um, and then he had a daughter, very pretty, blonde hair, blue eyes, so on and so forth. I think she kind of had a crush on me. I kind of had a crush on her at the time, and the dad loved me. Um, I could go off on a big tangent about why, but I guess it doesn't matter. But the point is, that if I would get there, I'd try to get there at lunchtime. They always, would want to give me a meal on the house. They were always trying to get me to drink vodka. Um, we had a really good friendship, and the dad would tell stories about what things were like when he was growing up. And so if I said anything about liking socialism, right, he would tell me that there was a difference between what I would read in a book in college, right, and how it had actually been carried out in Russia. And so what he was saying is that, let's say you got to go to a factory and you make something, right? Let's say you're making car tires and they pay you the same. Let's say they're going to pay you 10 rubles or something, right? They're going to pay you that amount whether you are working as hard as you can, working as fast as you can, giving it your very best, right? You still get the same amount of money. Or if you're, you know, you're sort of like, you don't want to be there, you're not working very hard, you're not working very fast, right? Like, and think about human nature. If you're going to get the same amount of money either way, what are most people going to do, right? So, because of that, nobody was working fast, nobody was working hard, right? And so, therefore, they weren't making very many car tires. So, production was low. And so, when you had a flat tire, that was a massive problem then in Russia back in the day, right? And and I'm only talking about the scarcity, right? I'm not even talking about, okay, so when there is a tire for sale and everybody, needs that tire, how much are they charging for the tire, right? 'Cause that's a whole other kind of discussion there. So the picture he described in my mind was that morale was very low. And so something that the government is always worried about is that the unhappy citizens are going to rise up, right? And something that people have noticed throughout the 20th century and probably beyond, but I'm not as familiar with that. Something that people have noticed over the years is that, for instance, in Russia, if they had a folk hero of some sort that they looked up to, it would inspire them, right? And so a lot of times when you had some kind of a revolution, people would rally around certain fictional characters. If there was any kind of signage at all, if people were holding up signs of something, a lot of times it would be like a character from mythology or whatever. And so the attitude of the government is that the government has to be number one in your life. And anything else that you really are into, right? That is competition. And they don't want that. So they stamp all that stuff out. And when when a country becomes communist. Like if you look at Russian history and you rewind it, go back to the story of Anastasia, right? And you look at pre-communist Russia, and you look at everything involved in that, right? The culture. Look at the culture of Russia in the 1800s. And that can be fashions, that can be art, which by the way, my day job is an art teacher. And when I'm talking about history and stuff, for whatever reason, all my friends are history teachers, right? And they all agree on all of the things I'm saying here. But at any rate, if you look at the Russia in the 1800s, it had a very rich culture, right? If you just fast forward 50 years and look at photos of Russia, right? You had a lot of plain gray concrete walls. You had a lot of drab clothing, right? Also, the old pictures of Russia, you're going to see a lot more smiles. Russia in the 1950s, say, mid 20th century, not a lot of smiles going around. You know what I mean? So, okay. So if you go on Twitter, and when I say that Hollywood likes socialism, I have friends in Hollywood who like socialism. It's not like it's a conspiracy theory or something, right? I'm not making this up. If you go on Twitter and you follow celebrities that are associated with what we're talking about here, these franchises that you see the franchises changing, right? If you look at the people who are involved in that, you're going to see a lot of support for socialism. And so again, and I genuinely think that's where we're headed. I think that America is absolutely going to become a socialist nation. And if you believe in socialism, I understand where you're coming from. I understand that you're tired of things like bribery and corruption and all of that, and I get it. Remember back to my thing with the golden bathtub and my mom who was too poor to live, right? I literally get where you're coming from. I understand that you have a good heart. We fight each other, as Americans. I mean, it's this person's right wing, that person's left wing, there's a thing going around right now that I think is very accurate, and that is if you have a jar of black ants and red ants together and you leave the jar alone, the ants get along just fine. But when somebody shakes the jar, the black ants and the red ants attack each other, right? Which, by the way, is pointless because who's shaking the jar, right? I genuinely believe that the people who are the problem, right? They are not right wing or left wing, right? They like that we're distracted. And so all this hate that we see every day on social media, that's the ants fighting, right? Don't be part of it. Don't be hateful to your neighbor. Love everybody. And the way we get through this is we talk to each other calmly and with kindness, right? Okay, so when I say these guys are into it, I absolutely think they mean well. And I think that they think they are saving the world. I really do. And so what they are doing when they say, okay, now, but we can't have competition. The new order, the new government that has not yet come to pass, that is going to have to be number one. that is going to provide you with your inspirations and things like that. And right now, what we are doing is very similar to what happened in the timeline of Russia, where they got rid of all that culture from the 1800s, right? So the goal right now is to delete the old culture, and that's what we're seeing here. And there's a really good chance that if you follow my channel, you are a fan of the culture you have grown up with, right? For me, I'm a big fan of 20th century American culture. I like 20th century music. I like 20th century movies, 20th century comic books, so on and so forth, right? And so a lot of people are really frustrated because they see that being eroded. And I'm going to use, since we're talking about Disney so much here, I'm going to use them as an example. Luke Skywalker. Imagine that in, let's say, 20 years, imagine that you couldn't buy tires for your car. There, you had to stand in a line for an hour for one loaf of bread, and that was it. That was your weekly groceries or whatever, right? Just imagine if you had the kind of situation that they had in Russia back in the 50s and 60s and stuff. That guy that I knew at the Russian restaurant, right? It was the stuff that he didn't like. And he left, right? Um, so imagine that we have that in America in the near future, and that characters like Luke Skywalker are still these iconic pop culture inspirations to people, right? And some kid that maybe hasn't even been born yet is going to watch an old Star Wars movie or something, and he's going to see Luke standing up to an evil empire. You know what I mean? And then he's going to be inspired, and he's going to go stand up to whatever government this is, right? They don't want that. So what did they do to Luke? When they finally made more movies with Luke in them, the first movie is basically all about just giving him his lightsaber, right? And then in the second movie, as soon as they do, what happens? He throws it away. And they use that phrase, subverting expectations. Another way to state that would be, we're going to have your inspirations not inspire you, or we're going to have your heroes be not very heroic. Indiana Jones, similar situation, where in classic Indiana Jones fans see that last movie, assuming they even saw it, and that's not what they've become accustomed to, right? All of that stuff is competition for what is to come, and people feel like it needs to be gotten rid of. In some cases, they probably think that they're replacing a hero with a different kind of hero that will better represent that future. But I very seriously doubt that's how it would go down. If things do go in that way, and I don't mean this in a hateful way to anybody, I hope they don't. I hope we fix the current system instead of just throwing it out entirely. I feel like a imperfect capitalist society is still going to function better than every socialist or communist society we have ever seen. And I know everybody says, well, it hasn't been done right yet. Maybe you're right. You know what? I mean, maybe you're right. But understand, just based on probability alone, there's a lot of dangerous stuff a person could do, and they could say this has never been done right before. You know what I mean? Someone could not know how to swim with sharks the right way, or not know how to walk a tightrope the right way, or whatever, right? But if you're trying this for the first time, that's a pretty scary thought, right? So a lot of people are scared. And then a lot of people on the right are scared of that possibility or that future for their children or their grandchildren or whatever. And then their knee-jerk reaction is to lash out and to use words that are hateful, to call people who don't believe in the same politics as them idiots or morons or whatever. That's not helping. You got to lovingly explain your point of view, and the same to everybody on the left. If you think that other people are incorrect and so on and so forth, you need to lovingly and patiently explain what you think. America is never going to get any better if we don't do that. So as for Disney, and why are the stocks going low? Because they do stuff like what they did with Luke Skywalker, right? They keep doing it over and over again with a variety of characters. And people who are fans of that old culture are not paying money to see this stuff. So Disney is hurting financially. The people in charge, though, it's not like they thought that wasn't going to happen. They knew that was going to happen. And it's full steam ahead for them because they think they're saving the world. You know what I mean? That's my take on all of this. I think it makes perfect sense, right? But I do think that the path we're on is dangerous, and I think we need to select a different path. So, all right, that's it for me for this video. Thank you for letting me share my thoughts. Thank you to those who are supporting the channel. I look forward to building this up and making this into a community we can all, be excited to be part of. So thank you, everybody. I hope everybody has a great week, and I'll see you later. Bye.